Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to have this first panel on a set of three for summer class that I'm teaching. The bulk of you are participating in the summer class on proposal writing and professional development. And the idea for that course is to offer professional development opportunities, but also an opportunity for students to develop a proposal based on a topic of their choice. And I'm really happy for the panelists who have agreed to share their insights and experiences with us so generously. Also thankful for you to allow other students to join us. We do have other MIHE graduate students here in the house and also joining online. So welcome to everyone. So if I'm going to assume that there are no technical difficulties unless I hear. So I would like to start, as the panelists have agreed, I'm going to offer a very brief introduction of each of you, and then I shared with you the three questions, the softball questions really, that I had prepared, and then I know students from the class may have an additional question. All questions are welcome. Megan will monitor the chat for those of you who are joining by Zoom. I'm going to start with Narke Norton, who has just recently been promoted to the Associate Director of Retention at the UGA Graduate School. Narke is a graduate of our master's program, has worked for the graduate school for the last 2 years now, previously as the Assistant Director for Recruitment and Diversity Initiatives, worked in the College of Ag and Life Sciences here at UGA as well, did his associate degree at ABAC, right, at Abraham Baldwin, and bachelor's degree here in the SPIA, Public International Relations. Narke is a leader on campus in so many ways, has been involved with the Martin Luther King Freedom Breakfast, with the Black Faculty and Student Association, was the recipient of the Achieving the Dream Award here, also involved in the TEDx steering committee, so has been very active here at UGA. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Nathan Moore, who serves as an assistant to the president in the UGA Office of the President, had 2 previous roles there as a graduate assistant and then as a postdoc staff member. Nathan comes with vast experience at albeit at the other Bulldog, SEC, Mississippi State University, did his bachelor's and master's work in political science, public administration there. Also served as the director of corporate and foundation relations there, and wrote his dissertation on policymaking from disadvantage, patterns of technology-based economic development programs. And so I really enjoyed working with Nathan on that, and continues to be a leader here at UGA. So thank you, Nathan, for being here. Thanks. Last but not least, Dr. Kristen Linthicum, who is the Executive Strategic Account Manager at UGA Marketing and Communications. The position has been in only for a few months now. Yeah, but also served in the university in the Office of the President here at UGA and in government relations here at UGA as well. Both Nathan and Kristen were involved in a previous experience of IHE students to Washington, D.C. seminar. Kristen helped organize the last one that we attended. Kristen is a UGA graduate, and when she was her bachelor's degree, where she was also editor of Red and Black here. So, and did her master's work at University of Virginia, also in higher education. So, and Kristen wrote her dissertation on examining privatization of public research universities at 3 Research One flagship universities. And so welcome all of you. Thank you for agreeing to be here. And I will ask the first question. I'll let you decide who wants to go first, and then I'll have a seat. So if you want to, please tell us briefly about your current position and how does your first position differ from what you thought you'd be doing when you were here as an IHE student?
I think the Office of the President should leave first.
Current staff member or former?
Current.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I happy to go. So as Eric said, I've served as assistant to the president. I've been in this role for almost a year now. As he mentioned, I have been in the office though for quite a bit longer. I served as a postdoc, and before that as a graduate assistant. And so I think I'm now going on my 5th year, maybe, or 4th year in the office. The way our office is structured is there's several other people like me. There's 3 assistants to the president. One actually is entitled Deputy Chief of Staff, but we each have portfolio areas that we are primarily responsible for with respect to staffing the president. So I have 4 of those areas: strategic planning, reaccreditation. I also work with primarily, and the largest chunk of my time is devoted to executive communications, and then I also am responsible for research and innovation work. And so I'm the liaison for the president's office in those areas, and work with a lot of great partners across campus. Marcom being one of the biggest. Kristen and I literally
talk every day.
Every day, probably. We work really closely together, which it's great that we knew each other so well before we both started our current roles. But I work closely with the Office of Research, serve as the liaison, for instance, with the UGA Research Foundation, with our SAC COC liaison, Meg Amstutz. I'm her point of contact in the president's office, and so I can say more later. But those are sort of my large sort of buckets of responsibility that I work in and day out. I would say probably half, maybe 40% or half of my time is devoted to executive communication. So I am quite involved with that. So in terms of how my role differs from what I expected, I had no expectations that I would be doing this at all when I came here to get a doctorate. As Eric mentioned, I worked in corporate and foundation relations. And so I thought when I left that I would maybe hopefully sort of enter an equal level, or maybe a position a little bit higher in that sort of structural hierarchy. I was interested in fundraising, alumni relations, economic development, tech-based economic development. So my goal, my thinking was that I would go to another university as sort of a business engagement officer, or maybe a university economic development liaison. And that was not the case. I'm doing something completely different. So things have turned out quite differently, but good. So I'll look forward to saying more later, but I'll turn it over to one of my other esteemed colleagues.
I can go since we talk so frequently. So I work in marketing communications, and my role is essentially to be a liaison to the other offices on campus, which is why we work really close together. And then I project manage all of our university-wide initiatives. So things like commencement, the president's annual report, State of the University address. And then I project manage our prestige campaign, which is essentially our national reputation campaign of how can we help peer and aspirant institutions. Think of the University of Georgia, think of more of our research mission, teaching missions, and help build our national reputation as an academic institution. So leaning away from some of the football branding and more towards some of the academic branding, which has been a really interesting, it's a newer campaign that we're doing. We've done the national reputation campaign for years, but this year we're kind of building it up and really focusing in on it and trying some new strategies. So that's been a really fun endeavor. And our office is essentially what you think of when you think of marketing and communication. So we have creative teams that are designers, videographers, photographers, writers. We have a marketing branch, and then we have our news branch where they're working with news media, answering inquiries, but they're also writing stories quite a bit and really building out kind of the story writing related to research right now. So that's kind of an expanding area. But yeah, I really enjoy it. It's I didn't know exactly what I would do when I was a graduate student, but I love communications. I love the place of public higher education in America and how we can help influence the public perception and really help the public see value in higher education. So I really enjoy doing that for a bit through government relations lobbying efforts, and then from a more marketing side of it right now. And so it's been really, like you said, not at all what I thought, but it's been really fun.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, my name is Narke Norton. So I'll talk a lot about what I was just left as assistant director. So the role that I had was primarily focused on preparing future graduate students for graduate school. So after you struggle and find out the hard way, hit a couple of bumps and stumble, you kind of realize from your perspective and my colleagues' perspective who I was students with, what experience looks like. So it gives me the chance to really talk about, for undergrad students, for alumni, and from students from different institutions, what this place entails. How do you advocate for yourself? So a lot of my work was 80% recruitment, maybe 20% retention. I started to build some first generation workshops for grad students because I am a first generation student from high school, undergrad, and grad school. And then now the new role is actually changing in that it's retention. So it's actually, well, my first role focused on general population. So no matter who you were, what your background was, I worked with you, I talked with you. This is more underrepresented focus, marginalized populations focus, and first generation focus. So still doing those workshops and events for those populations of prospective grad students, doing a little bit more yield programs for how do you look at the academic, professional, and social development of some of these students who are currently here. And then I'm also working with historically Black colleges and universities. We have a partnership with about 5 to 6 institutions to say, hey, if you send your student here, we'll provide 2 years of funding and we'll provide them those workshops and supports so that they have that extra push since they're shifting from a completely different institution to UGA. So those are some big shifts. When I started, I always like to first give shout out to Megan because during the Thanksgiving break, I came to her office to talk about IHE and figure out what my options were, and she sold me. So I always like to say thanks for doing that. Right. Yeah, so I talked to Megan about the program. At that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work with students, but I wasn't sure of the career path until I did the capstone. It forced me to find out what I wanted to do. And I am so grateful for that. So I talk about the capstone all the time because the component was to interview several people whose jobs you would want to take one day or be in one day. So I think it was 4 or 5. I interviewed maybe 15 different people. I wanted the whole buffet of jobs. But I found out that in the long term, I want to be a dean of students. That goal has not changed. That's still my long-term goal. My retirement goal is to be a president of a college or university. So those are the goals I still have today. And all of this is still building towards what those goals will be. So that's kind of how I'm still aiming for those goals. And once I finished IHE, I started with a grad school and just got that promotion yesterday. So I guess they still want me. But those goals remain the same. But I'm grateful that the capstone helped me understand what I wanted because it's great to have a class that really focus you to figure out what those options are.
Very good. Thank you so much. This is exactly what I was hoping for. I can sense folks really enjoying learning from this. Okay, so the second question, we'll go in the same order just to keep it. So Nathan, you're up first again. In what ways did you feel best and least prepared for your current position?
Okay, yeah. There's a lot more to say about being well prepared, I think, than not. And so I'll spend most of my time there. A lot of the skills, I'll just say first off, a lot of the skills I learned in IHE and a lot of the knowledge I learned here in the Institute apply every single day to what I do. And I think have lent themselves to my surviving 10 months so far in the job. And so they're just sort of in no particular order, but obviously the analytical skills that you guys learn every day are something that we do quite a bit, both qualitative and quantitative. But being able to quickly ascertain not only the veracity of information, but its validity, reliability, that's something that I do extensively in my strategic planning work. Sort of moving down that funnel as I think about it, the writing skills are incredibly important too. And I probably can't overemphasize that enough. I think there's an expectation when you come into graduate school that you can write and that you're a good writer. I think I've learned through my PhD experience and now in my current job that you can always improve your writing. And I think for me, the quality of my writing is something I've had to lean into and improve, but I got a great start here. Speed has probably has probably been my biggest challenge. And that was a challenge here in the Institute too. As you know, there's just so much that you are asked to produce in terms of writing. And so I would say that as you guys are thinking about your future, if you can develop an ability to write well and write quickly, I think it'll serve you really well. That's something I'm still working on. The last thing in the writing category I would mention is and I would consider this a skill, but the ability to tailor your writing for the executive for whom you're working or for the audience to whom you're writing. I know that's something you think about in the Institute quite a bit. I mean, we wrote for academic audiences. Now, Kristen and I very much do not write for academic audiences. And so just, kind of having the freedom, kind of loosening up a little bit to do some things with your writing that you wouldn't do in an academic setting, but that you do to external stakeholders and the kind of jobs that we have. So all those are things that I learned here that I think I became proficient in. I think the one area, and this didn't really have anything to do with IHE, I mean, this was more just a function of my own personal background, but I think I came out of the Institute with a really good understanding of a really good depth and breadth of the issues confronting higher education, particularly public research universities. I think what I had far less knowledge of was an institutional understanding of UGA and a unit level understanding of units on this campus. And I have really struggled to kind of build that up and gain that knowledge. I think for us, it's vital to kind of understand what may seemingly be a somewhat obscure office in the Division of Research devoted to animal research practices, for instance. I didn't know anything about that a year ago, and for the last 2 weeks, I've probably spent 5 or 6 hours engaging with that particular unit and on issues related to that unit. And so I think as you guys are leaving, I would just, it's not so much I wouldn't recommend that you necessarily do any work devoted to that, but just sort of the flexibility to sort of change your mind shift from, big sort of comprehensive issues like accessibility and sort of thinking on a more granular level related to unit engagement. That's been a hill that I've had to climb. I'm welcome. I want to make sure I don't monopolize the conversation. I'm welcome. Eager to take any follow-up questions, but I'll hand the baton off to Kristen.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I also got a really deep understanding of how universities work, what is high quality research, how research is conducted, how it's funded. Also kind of spent a lot of time thinking about how higher education's reached the point where we are at now. And I think that's really helpful to think about how then we communicate with audiences. And I also think one of the neat things about the Institute is just the diversity of experiences you get. I mean, you can have the academic research experiences, assistantship experiences in administrative offices, the travel, and the social opportunities. And I think all of that helped prepare me to think about how to work with different groups of people. Because one of the things that I've found is I've worked with all sorts of different groups of people. I mean, in government relations, the folks we worked with at the local level could not have been more different than the folks we worked with at the state level, who were very different than our federal stakeholders. The folks that we're communicating with now, we have different groups, but we're thinking about talking to presidents and provosts. And so I think the diversity of experiences here helps prepare you to work with a diverse group of people and to also have a really comprehensive understanding of how institutions work and the problems that we're facing right now. I don't know about least recruited. When I read this question, I was struggling to fill out a TA. And I think the thing that I underestimated was the actual bureaucracy of higher education. Like, I think when we talk about it, we hear it, then when you live it, it's like things move so much more slowly and are a little more cumbersome than I would like for them to be. I'd like to just get to make a decision and run. And I don't think that's something we can do very frequently. But I don't know if there's anything you can do other than just, patience of transcribing interviews may have prepared me for that.
Very good.
I'll say for my role, I think when you look for your next job or your opportunity, there's gonna be something in the description that may intimidate you, and overcome that intimidation. So I'll start with the least aspects. I felt for my role, they were using a CRM or customer relationship management system to work on communications. That was something new that they wanted to work with graduate coordinators. I had never worked with their system. And I was checking all the boxes for everything else except for that. It's like, what on earth? What is it? What? CRM. But I think being in IHE teaches you how to analyze, teaches you how to argue, not just in class, but also in writing, and beautifully touched on that. And I'm glad you did. So I realized when I was volunteering for a national organization called Minorities in Ag, Natural Resources and Related Sciences, that was a CRM. It was just called HubSpot. So kind of breaking down language, and as a first generation student, I love dismantling language. I hated the word isomorphism in IHE because everyone kept saying it the first year, and I was like, what is this? But it's just saying, copy and paste, in more first gen language. So if you break down what a word is, it helps you overcome that intimidation. Also, when you think about the components of that technical word, even if you didn't work with a software system, how do you communicate? How do you reach out to other people? So that's something I felt least prepared about, but from the skills I had, I was able to really understand. I've actually worked with something that gives me the chance to talk about it. If you haven't practiced enough interviewing, definitely do it. I love communicating. I'm a communicator, but interviewing is a different beast than just having a conversation. So it had been maybe 6 years until I interviewed, and you still feel nervous, your hands still sweat. All of that stuff, wear extra Old Spice. So, keep in mind that even though you talk every day with colleagues and friends, that is a skill set with interesting questions. And it's about not just performing, but tailoring how much you talk, how little you should say something, there's all these different rules around interview skills. So just because you can speak well does not guarantee your interview skills are at the level they need to be. I would also say another challenge was understanding in the role the environment of like faculty and graduate school relationships. So I had worked with faculty in the College of Ag to say, hey, this is a high school student who wants to do research in your lab for 6 weeks. That was a great relationship to have with faculty in South Campus. But when you're not working for the graduate school, understanding the behaviors, the attitudes, the expectations of what other people have in your department, or they're wondering what you do, that was something I was like, oh, this is a different battle. You have to say what your job is. And if someone tries to push something extra on you, that may not be your job. So either you might do something. My old boss used to say, are you a princess or a handmaiden? So are you kind of serving 1,000 people, or are you the one giving the orders in a way? So you have to understand your ability as a staff member in your positionality in what do you do? What don't you do? How do you direct? How do you deflect? And how do you answer those challenges? So that was something that was definitely different. Best things I prepared for is understanding the population of who you work with. So grad school, grad students was the population. I'm like, oh great, I'm in a grad program. I am a grad student. I work with grad students. I study with grad students. So I get an idea of how they think and what they're experiencing. So how do I talk about that? Building relationships is huge. Networking is so important. So if you're invited for a cocktail hour, if you're invited for the MLK Freedom Breakfast, if you're invited for these opportunities, there are paid ways where you can be invited in a room, where someone's paid for a table and they say, hey, come and join us. That's just not an opportunity for you to drink. It's just not an opportunity for you to eat. It's also an opportunity for you to network. Because I knew the hiring supervisor and I knew the boss of the hiring supervisor when I interviewed. And just because you know them doesn't guarantee you a job. That just says that you have an opportunity to be viewed, to be seen. You still have to show up and do the work. But networking is very real. Take advantage. So whether you have a shared Netflix account and you pay for the shared account, or whether someone gives you the password, whatever it takes to get access to networking, keep that in mind and be strategic about it, because it'll open doors. You still got to walk through the door, but it helps that someone is willing to open it for you. So that was very good in terms of understanding my audience, still in that writing context. We write for our professors. Dr. Ness is different than Dr. Kane, than different than the other professors. So it still teaches you about audience and understanding what the person you're looking towards and talking to values. So that's a skill set you always will have, no matter who you talk to.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Last question. This is perfect. I was roughly hoping we'd have like these 3 questions, set the stage, and then we're soon. I think I know you'll have a chance to ask follow-up questions here. So final question. What are the skills or knowledge or perspectives that you see as particularly relevant in the position similar to yours? And as you all continue to do, any advice here would be good as well. So what do you see as skills, knowledge, perspectives as particularly valuable?
Yes, I just the way I wrote these out: skills, knowledge, perspectives. So I'll kind of go in that order. We've already touched on it, but precision in writing and quantitative precision are something that are absolutely essential for what I do every day. And I think I don't want to speak for you, but I think the same would probably be true for for all of us up here, is that there's just an expectation that that you write something that is ready for mass distribution and consumption, and that goes for quantitative assessment as well. I mean, I think in my position, there are frequent conversations about what are key performance indicators that we're going to use to measure the university's performance in certain areas, and vis-a-vis what are data sources that we'll use to populate those key performance indicators. Those are that is a knowledge base and skills that I developed here and that have become essential to my job. In terms of knowledge, I think the Institute just did an outstanding job for me. Just I mentioned this earlier, but breadth and depth of issues related to higher education were really presented to us in a lot of fascinating ways throughout my time here, and so that has been essential. Just there's not really an opportunity or time to sort of catch up on what an endowment is, or like what technology transfer means. The list goes on, or just whatever term you could think of. There's sort of an expectation that you kind of understand the gamut of issues confronting higher ed, and that you can be conversant in those issues. And IHE did a fantastic job preparing me for that. And then, and in terms of perspectives, I would say, Narke hit on this, but just building relationships has been important, I think, for all of us. And I've tried to maintain that perspective of continuing to just not only sort of widening the net, but strengthening important relationships on campus. There's people like Kristen that I literally work with every day, and just making sure that I'm doing everything I can to strengthen those. And then the last thing I'll mention, and this is something that I'm still trying to become better at, but I think being solution oriented, there just seems to be no end of kind of problems or questions or issues that kind of roll in every day. And I think I'm guilty at times of sort of having maybe kind of a critical or more sort of observational perspective, like kind of breaking down an issue and kind of thinking about it, maybe even from an academic perspective. I think one thing that my job has demanded is that I, quickly sort of generate a solution to an issue. And I've had to really change my thinking there, that almost immediately, once I have an understanding of what the problem is, like what are we going to do about it? Like, what are tenable solutions to this particular issue? And I'm frankly still working on that every day. That's an ongoing process. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like Nathan was saying, the breadth and depth of understanding of higher education that you get here is just outstanding. And I think one thing that it really helped me do, especially in government relations, to a lesser degree in my current role, is understanding that a lot of the problems that we're facing are not a Georgia specific problem or a UGA problem. This is a trend facing higher education nationally. And it kind of helps you take a step back, take a deep breath, and then think through a solution in a more thoughtful way, as opposed to just targeting in on this one legislator has a complaint about this one topic. It's like, okay, well, let's think about this differently and how can we position it and what are other schools doing. And I think the work that we did here helps you have that ability to take a beat and understand it on a bigger level. I also think just I think the institute does a great job of talking about the purpose of higher education and really thinking through why we're here and what we're talking about. And then I think one skill that's critical is just a willingness to listen to other folks' perspectives. I think in my past job, it was more political. In my current job, it's more tactical of, somebody who's designing something is thinking about it in a completely different way than a person who's writing it or a person who is going to take photographs for it. And so understanding why somebody has a concern, how you can bring folks together around a common goal, and then all be working toward that goal, both so that folks have higher job satisfaction and so that a project gets done effectively. Because I think, it's so easy to narrow in on your specific responsibility, but kind of having that perspective of we're serving the university. A lot of times the work that we're doing is being passed right over to Nathan, who's going to be sharing it with a broader audience. And so I think the fact that you get to work with teams of students who are researching different topics and thinking about different issues really helps prepare your brain to work with teams that are handling complex challenges.
Yeah, I'd say for skill, definitely relationship building, which we've talked about. Don't be afraid to do that. In fact, for the first couple of years at IHE, I would never talk to Nathan because I didn't remember his name. Back then I was just like, that guy's so nice. And I remember he talked to me at the beginning of the program, but I couldn't remember his name. So every time I saw him, I'd just say, hey, and kept walking because I was in back like that. Once again, that little element of not knowing his name back then caused me not to network with him and talk to him as much. And then I think when you were about to leave, that's when we had like a longer conversation one day. And I was like, oh, thank God I know his name now. And now I'm gonna talk to him. So that was a barrier for me. And you never know what those small or large things are that will cause you not to build a relationship, not to talk to somebody. So I share that in just so I'm very transparent as a person, but I want you to know that I could have been talking to him for 2.5 years. I could have been in his house and eating something. I don't know if you cook, but that was an opportunity that I missed until later when he was leaving. Then I talked to him again. And that's thanks to him reaching out, right? Building relationship. So I say that, but also think about building relationship as a layered approach. So build it in the institute, build it at your job, build it with the custodian, build it with your bus driver, build it with other people in other offices and units, because you don't know where that bridge will lead, but it is better to have many routes to more than one location than to be stuck on one route. So just keep that in mind, that you build it locally, but you want to be presentable, you want to be approachable, because you just never know where someone comes along the line in the future. And it's because you talked to them, because you said hello, because you're now sitting next to each other several years later, and you don't foresee that back then in 2019, but it's 2022 and here we are. So it's a powerful thing to build that in terms of skill set. In terms of piece of knowledge, think about transferable skills. So when you look at a career, what are the things that you're already doing in your experiences in your academic career, in your job that is transferable? And then how do you still see what they need, and how do you fill those needs? No matter what job you have, everyone has a goal, everyone has some KPI to accomplish. So you've got to start with what you already know, which is what you're familiar with, and then go beyond what you're familiar with to see what their needs are and how you can fill it. And for perspective, I'm a big fan of show your worth and make sure you know your worth yourself. That does come in a lot of quantitative writing. So I have to show data to show that, okay, this number of students attended my workshop, so these number of students were retained from the HBCUs that we work with, because there's money attached to that. Also, if you have someone questioning and they don't know what you do, that means you haven't done enough to make them know what you do. So some people like to promote themselves, some people like to promote the work. Whatever philosophical line you fall on, you still have to show your value, you still have to show your worth. I talk a lot about the work I do because that's just something I care about for my students. College of Ag, best 5 years in retention when I worked there. Grad school, highest yield events for incoming accepting graduate students. I did some different things I believe in leaving a place better than when I found it. That's one of my philosophies. So I believe in the work. I won't talk about myself, but I'll talk about the work I do. And when people know the work you do, that's how you get a promotion. That's how they consider you for positions. That's how you get situations that start to move in your favor, because they see your work and they see your worth and they see your value. So you have to show that consistently. And once you have, then they already know that they don't have to kind of look at you 5 times, because you've got the data, because you've got the quant and the qual to prove it, because you've got the evidence that I've done this, I've done that, this is how this program is advanced. These are some new ideas of how we're going to innovate, whether we're creating something new or whether we're improving on something that's existing. So just keep that in mind so that you understand who you are and why you're here and what you bring to that space, because people can't forget. And you want to make sure that the work you do is valuable. So that would be a perspective that I'm also sure.
Very good. Thank you for such insightful responses to these 3 questions. Great advice, and I'll open the floor. What questions? Kate, I saw your hand first.
Sorry, I was ready.
And if you don't mind, sorry, if you would say your name and like where, for our panelists, and kind of where you are in the program kind of thing.
So I'm Kate Collier, and I'm officially known as 2nd year in the PhD program, which is but one of the conversations that I've had with a lot of people in the program currently is around accountability and how do you hold yourself accountable when you have all these writings, all these things that you need to do. So I guess my question is kind of a 2-part question. What did accountability look like when you were in your program, and how has it evolved to where you are now currently in your professional position?
I'll start. Accountability was complicated. As a,
Snaps to
yeah, first year, I mean, grad school is very difficult. As someone teaching about transitions into grad school, I work full time still, even in my doc program currently. But back then I was full time. There were all these assignments, there was a lot of language, and there was a lot of expectations you talked about, right? Where you should be. And I felt very behind. There's a naturalness to that aspect that a lot of us have felt and experienced when we go through our first year. I think for me, the accountability was, time management was very crucial. I did not master time management until I'd say after my first year. So I struggled and swam and drowned and floated back up until I realized, okay, when Dr. Ness gives a syllabus at the beginning of the year, I'm gonna now go on my hike and brainstorm what my ideas I want in the beginning of the year. So that by the midpoint, he's asking for proposal ideas, I've already worked on stuff. I also have 7,000 of the things that I do, like I'm president of my local theater. I do a lot of some of the things that Dr. Ness has brought up. So my hands are always tied in something, in community, and the campus. So by planning early and realizing it's an undergraduate shift of mentality versus grad, and also working full time on top of that. So I began to explore my time management. Where can I plan better before everything breaks loose? And that really changed the game for me in my IHE career. I was turning in projects much earlier in my last year and a half. In fact, even in my doctoral program, I've gotten my finals done 6 to 8 weeks in advance, which is historical, like for me. But time management was what I had to work on to keep myself accountable, because I noticed, which we all have done, you're working on something last minute, your grades will reflect last minute quality. And that was something that I could not be upset with my professor about. It was just, I waited for this period of time. I did not prioritize. I did things bits and pieces throughout the semester. So I didn't knock the whole paper out in the beginning, right? So career-wise, that has definitely helped me in my doctoral program that I'm in to understand, okay, I've survived here. I can make it anywhere. It's like, where's that? It's like Vegas? No, where's the place to say? New York, thank you. I just came from New York. So like IHE was a high rigorous program. So I feel much better in my doctoral program because I was around doctoral students the whole time. So that leveled me up. And then career-wise, that helps me know what my time management looks like. So that I'm able to use that skill set. But that was a struggle. And I learned how to use that so that I could do much better in my programs and also in my career.
One is you just finished your first year of the issue. I think cut yourself some slack because that first year is hard.
Yes.
Like it was so challenging for me. And I think one of the things also to keep in mind is just the PhD program's long. Like you will accomplish all of your different things. It just won't all happen at once, and it definitely won't happen early. So I think you'll build relationships and meet people and write papers and join in research. But that doesn't necessarily happen right at first. And so I think recognizing like 4 years is a long time and you'll accomplish those goals. But I also think like what you were saying, I think planning, doing, slowly doing your work throughout the semester, kind of having stages for when you do your work is helpful. And then one thing I found helpful as I went along was my first year, all I did was schoolwork. And then after that, I was more into an assistantship where I was going into the office every day and I was running more and doing more socially. And I think that was actually more helpful, even though there was more going on. I was much more productive. And I found that way throughout my career. It's like the more that's going on at home, the more you just have to dial it in and get things done. But also just cut yourself a break.
I'd be happy to offer you my perspective. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add on top of what they've already said. I would definitely agree that the first year I think is by far the toughest. Just you're adjusting not only to a new environment, but to the demand of the heavy demands of a doctoral program. I think I did a pretty awful job of the first probably 2 years of fostering any kind of work-life balance. I mean, I did a lot of schoolwork and little else. And so in terms of accountability, I think the biggest accountability challenge for me was to kind of loosen up a little bit and to do more socially, to exercise, to get out and to sort of put some guardrails around work, because particularly when your GA work builds, you can get involved in as much research as you want to. I mean, it can be endless, and so putting some constraints on that was something I had to learn. So yeah, the fact that you're asking, I think means you're probably doing a great job. So.
And congratulations. You did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Other questions?
I'll go. My name is Tori and I am a part-time student. So I just finished my second year and after this class have 3 left, 3 classes left. My story's a little weird. I worked at UGA for about 5 years, did my master's degree here, worked in admissions and orientation. Alton Standifer is one of my best friends. He was my boss when I was in orientation. But now I work for a higher ed technology company. So I work for Ellucian. Don't make fun of me, class. It's the largest higher ed technology company in the world. So we own Banner, DegreeWorks, all that kind of stuff. So yes, I work for them now. So a little bit unique, but I'm in that figuring out dissertation piece of things. And so how did you all go about narrowing your large, big ideas? I'm struggling with that. I have a lot of interests around enrollment management and such, but not sure how to narrow that down. So what did that look like for you all?
I can kick this one off. Yeah, my process was not very academic. I started with what I liked. I mean, I started really giving that thought, and as I recall, I think it's the toward the end of your second year where you really have to kind of nail that down. And so I really thought through all the classes that we had taken and the papers that I enjoyed reading, as simple as it sounds, and sort of the issues that I enjoyed talking about. And it led me back to the policy class that I have with Dr. Ness. Well, let me back up a little bit. There was a topical issue that I knew I really liked. And I think someone gave me the advice one time that you kind of need to think of your dissertation as a marriage, like you're gonna live and do life with this thing for many, many years. And I think that was good advice because you do. So topically, I felt like I was in a good place, but a big question mark for me was, the methodology, the theoretical frames, and on both of those parts, I thought back to the policy class that I had with Dr. Ness. And I just enjoyed reading some of our policy papers. I enjoyed the frames that we were talking about. And I felt like I could live with those. I could kind of be married to those for a few years. And so that made it a lot easier. And then the last piece I'll mention, I think for me, and I think this is true of a lot of people, there's kind of a juggling act between sort of the big idea and what you can tangibly get done. In terms of, getting through IRB, getting a project done. And so I was sort of unapologetically kind of focused on what can I actually get done? I want to make sure it's something that I can do in a reasonable amount of time. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah,
Those are all
great.
different
Thank you.
components I thought about.
Yeah, I totally agree. That it needs to be something that you're excited about. And I think there were a lot of things that I found interesting. But interesting can only hold you for so long. Like you have to have some joy and some excitement in it. And it feels like a lifetime ago that I went through this. So I'm trying to remember. I know that I did several independent studies, one with Dr. Ness and one with Dr. Kane, that were very helpful. Where I kind of spent some time thinking about topics and dialing in. And then the way that we did comps when I was a student was really helpful. I know they changed, so this may not be useful, but my questions were kind of based on, they helped set up my chapters for my proposal. And so as I spent time preparing for comps, I was also kind of working through those, which was helpful. Okay, thank you.
I'm a little earlier in the process, Tori, but I feel very connected to what you're asking. I was very notorious about having too many ideas because they all intersect. Like if you talk about race and place and like economics and politics and higher education, all those things, there's a lot of intersection. But then when you're a professor, it's like, that's like 7 different dissertations. It's kind of like, but they connect.
Right.
So I think academically you learn how each intersecting idea is really a separate book and volume that deserves its own value of time. I would say where I'm interested in studying Black male students and how they are retained and how they find success in predominantly white institutions. So that's where I'm going to. I think what helped me is 100% what y'all are saying. For me was a litmus test of excitement and passion. I also had several interests. So I was interested in first generation students, some first generation Black students, and then for specifically Black male students, since more than 60% of Black males don't finish their degree in higher education. I'm a rural student. I'm from a low socioeconomic status background. All of those things interested me. And when I decided to go the first gen route, I think I felt my passion dwindled some. It was like, I was trying to figure out for my career, how do I have a dissertation that will tailor that I'll be a president or dean for all students? So it kind of, I let someone get into my ear and dissuade me about what I wanted to do. And then I noticed that my passions were definitely different. But what I noticed is every time I read an article about Black students or Black faculty or Black first gen students, I could not put down the article.
Yeah.
That was my litmus test. And I hated it every time Dr. Stitch, we were reading articles and I'm like about to quit and just skim and be like, nah, I'm good. And then there was that last article about Black students. I was like, darn. Now I got to read this. So like I'm after hours of reading and you want to quit, but something in that article made me want to read it. And I could, I know when I'm enjoying what I read too, because I'll skim generally 70% of what I'm reading to get the gist, but the stuff that I have to read every word about, or it's a sign that I really care about a topic more than normal. So as a person who also share many interests and have a lot of things, figure out which of those topics that you cannot stop reading about, that you can't put down, and that would make you still read after 3 hours, and you would still be excited when you're done.
Yeah.
I think those would be what made a difference for me emotionally. And I definitely heard exactly what y'all are also saying, because that aligns. That may help you kind of separate the wheat from the chaff.
Great.
Thanks, Tori, for your question.
Good, thank you. Other questions? Megan, are there any on the chat?
There are none online.
Okay. All right, very good.
I'll try
Brian,
to
thank you.
tailor one of my questions. So how do you all implement or influence policies within your respective areas through the use of what you learned here in IHE? And I know you've touched on this a little bit of like writing skills, like as you're drafting policies, like your writing is gonna be really important, but if there's anything else there.
I can start. So I'm trying to change the way we use the tool. This is gonna sound very basic, but we use our files are on Dropbox. We use a project management system called Asana. It is cumbersome. It does not make sense. Everyone uses it in different ways. And we've got about 55 people in our office. And so we need to streamline it. So this is my center project. And I think the way that I'm going about it is by interviewing everyone. So like sitting down with everybody, every team, and trying to understand how they use it, what works for them, what doesn't, so that if we were to change the policy, it doesn't make anyone's life harder. And so essentially, it's like, I didn't think about it like this, but essentially conducting interviews and then essentially coding for themes, drawing out the themes, and then proposing solutions based on that. So I think it's listening skills, it's the analytical skills where you understand, okay, this person's complaint makes a lot of sense, like we need to address it, or I understand that you're frustrated, but like this isn't changing. And so I think trying to have the sense of like what matters and what is less critical to the change. But yeah, and I feel like we all talking about relationships quite a bit, but it's like knowing people, building trust with them so that they'll tell you what they think, that they take your conversation seriously. And then when you implement a change that may not be exactly what they want, they can at least buy into the general concept and direction so that folks feel some ownership over it and also follow the policies.
A key part of my job or an expectation of the person in my position is to be an idea generator. And so it's been important for me to be able to sort of have an understanding of where UGA is positioned kind of historically, kind of in its sort of historical trajectory, and sort of where that stands in sort of the broader higher ed landscape, and then to identify things that I think would help move the needle, and then propose those items. I mean, that's something that we do quite often in our office, and so I think that touches on kind of what you're asking. And I think I would have I think before I started my current role, I would have thought that was sort of just a function of knowledge. I'm increasingly realizing that is a function of hard work, of like constantly trying to read about what's happening at the university and what's happening more broadly. Of course, as we all know, that's a lot easier said than done because there's always demands on your time. And I think I've really more and more have understood the importance of constantly sort of scanning both institutionally and kind of more broadly, and kind of doing the hard work to make sure that gets done.
What was your name again?
I'm Brian. Yeah,
Brian.
I didn't do my introduction. I just finished up my first year as a part-time PhD student, and I work full-time at Kennesaw State.
Part-timers, yeah. So I love your question. It's a phenomenal one. I think one of the greatest things I learned definitely was the history of the institution, history of higher education, policy, and also Dr. Hearn's class on finance, which sounds like was so scary, but he was like, it's not that scary. Just understanding like how things move and shake the institution was really important for me. So in my role, changing policy, we have a recruitment enhancement grant that a lot of departments can apply for. You submit a proposal, you show who you're recruiting, how you're going to recruit them. You have to submit data from your previous, if you're a recurring applying applicant. Okay, show me the data that you actually implemented this and how you recruited. So like the things that you are all responsible for finding out, doing, analyzing. It's so funny that some people don't do that when they put in their proposals. Some do a phenomenal job where they show the data, where they're showing you their numbers, and others you're like, did you even read the proposal? So nobody is perfect, is what I've definitely learned, but having the ability to analyze data, to read through how people might sideswipe information or not answer those questions. Like in Dr. Hearn's class, you learn about a lot of different models and how you can avoid things, or maybe you want something on the last agenda item. So having those tools to understand how people are communicating, understand also outside of that, but just where they come from, what motivates them, is very important. Like if I didn't know that, that would have been an issue. working in higher ed and not taking these classes to understand where this comes from, why we are what we do for hundreds of years. I always talk about the history of standardized test scores because I learned it in IHE. And I challenge those policy questions in programs and even in our decisions in terms of how much do we weigh the GRE or the GPA on a student when they're showing other ways holistically that they can compete. So that's some direct ways that I've definitely gotten to challenge some things policy-wise. I'll also say, on your point of the interviewing, last year when I was on the board of my local theater, they were looking at diversity. I used all my skill sets of understanding how to interview, how to collect data, and like put it in a the only difference is I didn't publish. But I went through that whole process, and it was weird when you apply those skills because it feels separate sometimes, that you're learning the academics, but then when you get into what you're doing, like writing, it's different, but it's still the core, right? It's just not as many rules and as many strings tied. It's a little bit more direct. So being like, but I learned this in capstone, and I learned this in case study, but I'm doing it, and it's weird. It feels weird to actually do it, and it's not too complicated. So getting to understand that, like, our theater for 50 years that talked about diversity but didn't do anything. Actually interviewing them, spending time, collecting data, packaging that in a presentation to say, here are the recommendations, here are the implications, like here are the limitate, like it was weird to apply some of those skill sets, but you do, and feel good about that when you do it. It feels more natural the more you do it. Yeah, so even on the job and off the job, I've applied a lot from what I've learned here. So I'm very grateful for your question, because you can make a change in policy, no matter how small or how large, and sometimes people don't even realize they need a change unless you say something about it, and you realize that what they have been doing has not had a benchmark, which I learned from here too. We do that all the time in my office, benchmarking to justify your changes, to justify the things you're trying to do. So I really like that question. Thank you, Brian.
My name is Matt Gregory. I am wrapping up my 4th year here at IHE, and I'm currently on the job market. And I've gotten very reflective about my time at IHE as I've been pursuing jobs. So just very quickly, if you could tell some of the more junior students, if you could go back and do one thing differently at IHE, what would that be?
It's a thick question.
And that can be directly applicable to the job or just in general.
More thoughtful about actually the practice interviews you described, of talking to more people about what they did in their roles. So I think I got toward the end of my time and I was like, oh, I need, like, what am I gonna do? And it's like, I don't know how I was surprised by that. And so I think being a little bit more intentional about professional development and about taking steps toward a job, I could have done a better job of that.
I'd say I would have loved to talk to more people above me. Like upper class students who were like further in their programs beyond me. I think when you're part-time, you have limitations. So I think I didn't even have a lot of chance to make time to go to seminars as much because of like my work requirements, working like 50, 60 hours a week. I would have really enjoyed to talk more to students who are above me to just understand, I really enjoyed like people who were in the class. I don't think we ever had a chance to have a class together, but those were the ones that I chatted with. But I think I could have grown a lot more, which is why I do a lot more in my doc program, because I missed out on that. Like there were people posting about socials, and is it HESA? So like they would say, hey, we're going downtown for this, that, and the other, or hey, we're doing something. I didn't pursue that. So I think I talked more with people who were then under me as I went up to just be more accessible, but I didn't do my due diligence in really reaching out and getting the resources and support and the social component of just connecting to people who were already in the program, who could have been very helpful. Obviously, you're gonna like lean on your cohort a lot, but I think you, once again, it's like a community of practice. So being able to say to people in my doc program, you've already done your publishable, what does that really mean? Because I still don't get some of those components about methodology or XYZ. I've been able to lean on those people in my doc program because I didn't have that skill set in my master's. So I would have done that differently.
Yeah, and I think for me, I feel that the Institute prepared me really well for the job market. I think we probably all do. And I was so intimidated and scared of the PhD that I sort of came in with a sort of a production mindset. You know, I'm gonna get this done. I'm gonna be on time with my assignments. I'm gonna try to excel here. So if I could change one thing, I think I would have just enjoyed it more. Just kind of loosen up and just you know, kind of enjoy the experience. Because in a way, I wish I could go back and do it again and do that very thing. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. Like take a deep breath, but like I was saying to you, like, and realize you're gonna get it all done and just enjoy the time. But it's easier to say when you're done.
yes, very easy. Yeah, when you're finished.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. A small token from the McBee Institute of Higher Education, properly branded. So thank you, each of you. And you know, I ever the qualitative researcher, natural language here, a couple highlights. So Kristen said earlier, take a beat, right? I really like that. Nathan, you said the dissertation is a marriage, like, you know, to understand better that analogy and metaphor. Narke, to dismantle language, isomorphism is copy and paste. I love that. The shorthand, some great advice. Thank you so much for your time and insight. Thank you all for.